Hello guys, it's Dove. I just wanted to show you my new blueberry bushes and show you how to transplant them into large containers. And so these are small blueberry bush varieties. They're not the great big ones, and they're not going to give you a ton of blueberries every year, but for people who are gardening in small spaces, it's really good because you can keep them in containers for the whole life of the blueberry plant. And you can move them with you. Like if you live in an apartment, you can grow one on your balcony or out on your patio, and then you can just move it with you. Or if you have a home and you're not quite sure where to put it, or if you don't have the right type of soil, you can move it around to where it's getting the right sun exposure. And of course, when it's grown in a container, you control the soil that's in there, and so you have a better chance of keeping it the way that it likes to be, which is acidic. Blueberries are in a family that likes acid soil, so they actually grow really well under like a grove of pine trees or whatever, where other plants actually don't do very well. You could grow blueberry bushes there, and of course if you're doing it in the ground and you have a lot of space, then you can grow the great big high bush blueberry bushes. These are actually low bush, and I got these are 2 to 3 years old. So normally when you get plants from normal sources, it's not going to be this big. Normally it's like just a couple twigs, and it's just a 1-year-old plant. But this is, I think, either 2 or 3 years old. This is a Polaris, and I have 4 different ones, and they're all suited to container gardening. So when you're looking for them, you want to make sure that you're getting one that is going to stay under 4 feet, I guess, is probably best. Anything more than 3.5, 4 feet is probably just going to be too big for a container. And this container is actually 21 inches across, and I'm not sure how tall it is, but it doesn't matter because most of the growth of blueberry bushes is in the first, or most of the roots are just in the first 8 to 12 inches, and so this is plenty deep enough. Actually, I have a block of really rigid styrofoam that the insulation kind. I put a block of that in there to help fill the space because it's such a big container. And the people who grew these plants, these organically grown blueberries, they were local to my state, and I do recommend trying to find something local to your state, to your region, so that you're getting something that is used to your weather and everything. And they suggested for a soilless mix in containers, they suggested half peat moss and half pine bark mulch, which is this really big chunky stuff. Okay, and so that's what they're growing in right now. I just transplanted these 2 last night, and I have 2 more to go. And so you want to mix up your peat moss and your pine bark mulch, in the container, and it'll be really dry when you do that. And this is the peat moss. It's Canadian peat moss. It's actually from the same company that I got the other peat moss, which was in my seed starting video, but it's just a different packaging for some reason, because this is the bigger one. This is like 3.8 cubic feet, and so it comes in a different package. But I was assured that it was the same peat moss, that there was no difference. And then you can get pine bark mulch either locally at a place that they have the bulk mulch in stock, and you can get it by the yard or whatever, or you can go to like Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that and get pine bark. And then so you're going to mix it up into your container, and then before you plant your blueberries, it's really important to prepare the peat moss, because regular peat moss, when you first get it out of the package over there, is very dry. And so you have to wet it down before you put your plant in here, because if you don't, then you'll never get it wetted down. Because when I first put the mixture in these pots, I just let it sit here, and it didn't rain, and it didn't rain, so it never got wet. And then I thought, well, I better start getting it ready to plant. And so I just came over here and I started spraying the top of it, several times a day. And I checked it probably 3 days later. I just took my garden fork here or something, and I loosened it, and none of it was wet. I mean, all that water was just basically running off. Now, I did see, some water on the pavement here, and I thought, well, surely it's soaking up some of it, and it wasn't. It was totally bone dry. And so what I had to do is I had to spend like 15 minutes on each pot, taking my hose and spraying it with one hand. I had to hold the sprayer with one hand, and obviously I can't do that now and show you, but I held the sprayer with one hand. I sprayed it and then gave it a turn, and all that dry stuff came up, and I sprayed, gave a turn, sprayed, gave it a turn, and it took literally 15 minutes just for one pot to moisten this peat moss. And it was a chore, and it was a pain. And so I really don't like to work with peat moss that much, straight peat moss like this, but like I said, they recommended this potting mix for blueberries because it is an acidic potting mix, and that is their natural liking. Excuse me, I need to use my paper towel here. That's what they naturally like, is an acidic soil. And so it's pretty necessary to do this, but you have to make sure that you wet it and prepare it before you put your blueberry plant in, because I can only imagine that if I had my plant in here, I would have never gotten it wet, because there's no way with that bush in there. I mean, you can see that obviously you're not going to want to take your garden fork and stick it in there and start mixing it around. So it's incredibly important to prepare it and wet it down first, and then keep it wet. Don't ever let it dry out. That's probably the most important thing I can tell you about growing these in the peat and the pine bark mulch. Don't let it dry out. Just always keep it moist. And usually, like once a week, if you have a nice mulch over the top of it and it's not really, really, really hot, once a week is probably okay. A good deep watering. But if it's extremely hot where you are, then you're probably going to want to go ahead and do it like, twice a week, or even more often if necessary. So however often you feel that you need to do that, just check it. Just put your finger down in there, and if it's starting to feel like it's drying out, then you want to water it. Okay, so that is the most important thing I could tell you about growing blueberries in containers, is don't let your peat moss dry out. And then, because they are acid-loving plants, I bought a special fertilizer, and I mixed it in. This is what it looks like. I haven't mixed this in yet. This is Happy Frog, acid-loving plants. It's for like rhododendrons and azaleas and blueberries and all this other stuff, and it has the mycorrhiza right in there, so I really like this. It already has the beneficial microbes in the fertilizer, and so all I have to do is stir that in and mix it up, and that's what I've done here. I stirred that in already, so you can't see the fertilizer, and then I'm just going to create a well, of course, and then when you put your blueberry in, you basically want it to be, you want the soil level to be pretty even with how it is in your container. Now, if you're not getting them in containers, you'll have to follow the grower's instructions that they send with you. But see where this is, that soil line, that's about where I'm going to have the soil line in the pot. Although I might go up just a little bit more, not much, just a little tiny bit more. And like I said, it depends on how you get it, whether it's a 1-year-old plant, 2-year-old plant, whether it's potted or bare root or whatever. And the only reason I'm getting away with planting these right now is because they are a potted plant. Normally, if you buy a blueberry plant that's just the bare root, then you would have to plant it in the spring, right when you get it, and they will only ship them in the spring. But because these are 2 to 3-year-old plants and they are potted, they can ship them all year round, well, all summer, spring through fall, and you can plant them spring through fall, and so it doesn't matter. So because I was building all those raised beds this spring, I just let them sit there. So they've been sitting here in their pots for 2 months, and I'm finally just now getting a chance to get them in their new homes. And so I think that's all I wanted to tell you. Oh, you want to make sure when you're done, I haven't done this yet, but after you've put that in there and wet it down really well, you want to take more of your pine bark mulch and use that as a top layer. Either that or pine needles, anything acid or acidic, they'll like that. So I'll take that and I'll fill that up the rest of the way with some nice pine bark mulch, and then I'll keep it moist, and hopefully she'll be happy and making berries for me next year. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Talk to you later, bye.